What if I told you that stupidity isn't just about being unintelligent, that it's something way more dangerous? What if it's not just a lack of smarts, but a force that can take even the brightest minds and turn them into tools of destruction? What if the biggest threat to our world isn't evil people doing evil things, but regular people who've simply stopped thinking? Think about it. A highly respected scientist with multiple degrees suddenly starts pushing harmful conspiracy theories. A kind, thoughtful teacher begins backing destructive ideologies. A loving parent starts making choices that actually put their kids in danger. These aren't bad people. These are intelligent, well-intentioned individuals, and yet something's gone wrong. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian and anti-Nazi dissident, had a chilling term for this: the power of stupidity. And here's what's really unsettling. This isn't something that happens to other people. It happens to people like you and me, right now, around us, maybe even within us. This isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. Let me take you back to 1961. Yale University. Stanley Milgram ran one of the most controversial psychology experiments of all time. Volunteers were told to give what they believed were electric shocks to another person, increasing the voltage every time that person got a question wrong. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. They could hear screams, "Please to stop," and yet 65% of them kept going, all the way to what they believed were lethal levels. These weren't monsters, they weren't sadists, they were everyday people, and they did it because someone in a lab coat told them it was okay. They gave up their own judgment, their own morality, just handed it over. That's exactly what Bonhoeffer witnessed in Nazi Germany, and it led him to one of the most disturbing insights into human nature ever proposed. But before we go deeper, let me ask you something. Have you ever believed something, not because you really thought it through, but just because everyone around you seemed to believe it? Hold on to that thought, because it might be one of the most important questions you ever ask yourself. Bonhoeffer wasn't your typical ivory tower philosopher. He was in the trenches, a German Lutheran pastor watching his country unravel. Born in 1906 to a family of scholars, his dad was a leading psychiatrist. Bonhoeffer believed deeply in education and rational debate. But when Hitler rose to power, he saw something that shook him to his core. It wasn't just ignorant mobs falling for propaganda. It was cultured, educated, church-going Germans, professors, clergy, doctors, not just tolerating the Nazi regime but supporting it. People who knew better. People who should have resisted, and yet they didn't. In 1943, sitting in a prison cell for his role in a failed plot to kill Hitler, Bonhoeffer wrote something terrifying. "Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protests nor force can touch it. Reasoning is useless. Facts bounce off. Logic doesn't land." That insight still hits hard, because evil, Bonhoeffer wrote, usually carries the seeds of its own undoing. It's self-aware. It knows it's evil. But stupidity thinks it's doing the right thing. It believes it's on the side of good, and that makes it almost impossible to correct. Here's the part that really makes you sit up straight. Bonhoeffer said that stupidity isn't a matter of intelligence. It's not about IQ or education. It's something deeper, something systemic. What he called functional stupidity, or what we might recognize today as willful ignorance. He wrote, "In conversation with a stupid person, one feels that one is not dealing with the person themselves, but with slogans, catchphrases, and ideas that have taken possession of them. It's like they're not even there anymore. Just an echo of whatever system or group they've plugged into." And that's what made Bonhoeffer's thinking so ahead of his time. He realized that stupidity often doesn't come from personal failings, but from environmental pressures. When people live in systems that punish honest thinking and reward blind conformity, stupidity becomes a survival tactic. Let's face it, we live in a world that profits from mental shortcuts. Social media algorithms make billions off our outrage. News outlets thrive on controversy, not nuance. Politicians win by repeating catchphrases, not offering real solutions. Meanwhile, many people are just trying to get by, juggling jobs, bills, stress, endless distractions. It's no wonder we default to intellectual autopilot. Economists even have a term for it: rational ignorance. Basically, it's the idea that sometimes it just doesn't seem worth it to do the hard work of really understanding an issue. So we don't. And that's exactly how a society full of smart people can still make very dumb, very dangerous choices. Now here's where it gets even more unsettling. Our brains are built to make these shortcuts. In the 1950s, psychologist Leon Festinger introduced the concept of cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when we're faced with information that contradicts what we believe. Our brains don't like that tension. It's uncomfortable. So we find ways to resolve it, often by rejecting the new information instead of questioning our beliefs. Bonhoeffer saw this decades before psychologists gave it a name. He understood something profoundly simple, but incredibly powerful. We don't think clearly when we're scared, exhausted, or overwhelmed. And look around. That's exactly the state most people are living in today. Financial stress, information overload, political chaos. We're bombarded every day with conflicting messages, and the easiest thing to do is to retreat into mental shortcuts. That's why Bonhoeffer argued that stupidity wasn't just an individual issue, it was a social disease, something that thrives in group settings. He wrote, "Stupidity is not a psychological problem, it is a sociological one." And here's where the science catches up with his insight. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch ran famous experiments on group conformity. Participants were asked to compare the lengths of lines, and even when the right answer was obvious, if everyone else in the group gave the wrong answer, 75% of people would go along with the group at least once. Why? Because being wrong with the crowd feels safer than being right alone. Now imagine that same dynamic, but multiplied by the power of the internet. Social media doesn't just connect us, it shapes us. Algorithms are designed to feed us what we already agree with. Over time, this creates what psychologists call echo chambers, bubbles of information that reinforce our existing beliefs while shutting out opposing views. And guess what? These bubbles feel amazing. They're comforting. They validate us. But they also make us intellectually lazy. In 2000, why? Because lies are often more emotionally satisfying than complex, nuanced truths. That's why when someone shares a piece of misinformation, something dramatic, something that confirms their worldview, they're not just passing along bad info. They're participating in a system designed to reward emotional simplicity over thoughtful analysis. Ever wonder why your feed seems to show you exactly what you already believe? That's not a coincidence. That's the architecture of chosen ignorance. And here's the thing, it's not new. We've seen this pattern before. During the Salem witch trials, ordinary, religious folks genuinely believed they were protecting their communities by condemning their neighbors. During the Red Scare in the 1950s, patriotic Americans sincerely thought they were defending democracy while destroying people's lives over baseless accusations. These weren't evil people. They were good people caught in systems that made stupidity feel like virtue. So the real question is, how do we resist? Bonhoeffer believed that true resistance required something he called costly grace. Not just believing what's right, but paying the price to live it. Thinking independently when it's hard, when it's unpopular, when it costs you friends, comfort, or even safety. Today, we understand that the forces we're up against aren't just social, they're also neurological. We're wired to avoid discomfort, to seek fast answers, to cling to our tribes, and now billion-dollar tech companies have built machines that exploit these tendencies with stunning precision. Every click, every scroll, every like, it's all being tracked and fed back into systems that know exactly how to keep us reactive, tribal, and intellectually numb. We saw this play out during COVID-19. People with medical degrees, engineering backgrounds, even law professors, all sharing and endorsing conspiracy theories about vaccines and treatments. These weren't failures of intelligence. These were failures of independent thinking under stress. And this brings us back to Bonhoeffer, who gave his life resisting a regime built on collective intellectual surrender. He wasn't just resisting politics. He was resisting the collapse of moral and intellectual independence. His last words, moments before being executed, were, "This is the end, for me, the beginning of life." He believed that to stop thinking critically is to stop being fully human, to become, in his words, a puppet whose strings are pulled by whoever's in power at the moment. So now the challenge comes to us. Who stands fast? Who keeps thinking clearly when everyone else gives in to fear, pressure, or convenience? It's not about being smarter. It's not about having more degrees. It's about making a daily choice to stay curious rather than certain, to choose truth over comfort, to pause and think when everyone else is reacting. Because these aren't acts of heroism. They're everyday disciplines. But in a world where so many people have stopped thinking, they become revolutionary. Here's something we often overlook. Thinking is hard, really hard. It takes time, effort, and sometimes pain. It's uncomfortable to sit with conflicting ideas. It's uncomfortable to admit we might be wrong. It's uncomfortable to hold back from reacting emotionally to something that feels urgent or infuriating. But Bonhoeffer believed, and modern psychology agrees, that this discomfort is the price of staying fully human. In a world built to profit from our intellectual surrender, choosing to think independently isn't just helpful, it's radical. So what do we do about it? How do we fight back against this rising tide of functional stupidity? Let's start with the individual. You and me. Right now, the first weapon in our arsenal is something psychologists call intellectual humility. It's the simple acknowledgement that we don't know everything, and that we might be wrong. Sounds easy, right? But try it. Think of a belief you hold strongly. Now ask yourself, what evidence would make me change my mind? If you can't think of any, that's a red flag. So let's make this practical. Here are a few real, doable practices to help resist the pull of intellectual laziness. 1. Practice intellectual friction. Pick one day a week. Just one. Spend 30 minutes reading, listening to, or watching something thoughtful from someone you disagree with. Not to own them, not to find flaws, but to seriously test whether your own views can hold up under pressure. 2. Embrace productive ignorance. When you find yourself totally convinced about something, pause. Ask, what don't I know about this? It's not about doubting everything. It's about making space for the complexity that almost always lies beneath simple answers. 3. Slow down your sharing. Before you post, repost, or react to something online, take 60 seconds, 1 full minute. Use that time to verify the source. Check if it's true. That tiny pause can break the feedback loop of emotional outrage that algorithms feast on. 4. Say, I don't know. Seriously. Say it out loud. Post it. Type it in a comment. It's one of the most underrated things a person can say, especially in a world where everyone is pretending to be an expert on everything. But here's the thing. Individual habits alone aren't enough. Bonhoeffer understood this. He wasn't just calling for better personal choices. He was calling for structural change, because stupidity, real, dangerous, functional stupidity, thrives when our environments make honest thinking hard and costly. So what needs to change on a larger scale? For starters, we need transparency from social media platforms. People should know how their feeds are being curated, what biases are baked into the algorithms, who decides what gets amplified, and why. We also need massive investment in public media literacy. Not just teaching people how to spot fake news, but helping them understand how information works, how to trace sources, evaluate evidence, and detect manipulation. And beyond that, we need to change the incentives. Right now, viral content gets rewarded. Outrage gets clicks. Simplicity gets shared. That's not a bug in the system, it's the system. But what if platforms rewarded thoughtful discussion? What if comment sections highlighted people who changed their minds rather than just those who shouted the loudest? Most importantly, we need to reduce the kinds of stress and instability that make intellectual shortcuts so tempting in the first place. When people are drowning in medical bills, living paycheck to paycheck, and terrified of losing their jobs, they don't have much bandwidth for nuance. They don't have time to sit down and read a policy brief. They want answers. Fast ones. Simple ones. That's not a character flaw. That's survival. Bonhoeffer never got to see the digital world we live in now, but his warning feels almost prophetic. He saw propaganda spread by newspapers and radio. We're dealing with something far more powerful. Algorithms that track our behavior in real time, adapt to our emotional responses, and serve us exactly the kind of content that keeps us hooked and keeps us passive. And now we're entering a new chapter. Deepfakes, AI-generated content, reality itself being shaped and reshaped in real time. We're not just facing human manipulation anymore. We're facing automated systems that are surgically designed to exploit our weaknesses, our emotions, our instincts, our desire to belong, our need for certainty. And here's what makes that so dangerous. Our brains evolved for a different world. A world where quick thinking helped us survive and slow thinking could get us killed. That wiring is still there. We seek out what's familiar. We trust what feels emotionally right. We cling to what makes us feel safe. Bonhoeffer understood the moral dimension of this. But now we see the neurological side too. This isn't just a social problem. It's a cognitive vulnerability that's being hacked in real time. So where does that leave us? With one incredibly important, incredibly difficult truth. We are all vulnerable. Every one of us. No matter how educated, how experienced, how confident you are, the moment you think you're immune to functional stupidity, you've already started to fall into it. That's the real danger, isn't it? The moment we say, well, that would never happen to me, we've already let our guard down. Because this kind of intellectual surrender doesn't come with alarms or warning signs. It doesn't shout, hey, you've stopped thinking. No, it whispers. It feels like certainty. It feels like clarity. It feels like safety. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Bonhoeffer saw this in Nazi Germany. People weren't walking around thinking, I'm making a horrible moral compromise. They were thinking, I'm being loyal. I'm protecting my family. I'm doing what's best for my country. Functional stupidity doesn't feel evil. It feels righteous. And that's why Bonhoeffer's challenge still hits so hard today. He didn't just ask, who knows the truth? He asked, who stands fast? When the pressure is high, when everyone else is nodding along, when thinking for yourself costs you something, who still thinks? Let's be honest, thinking independently is exhausting. Especially now. It's so much easier to join a side, pick a team, and let the slogans do the work for you. But that's exactly what leads to what Bonhoeffer warned about: a society full of people who've stopped being individuals and have become extensions of the strongest voices around them. So how do we keep from becoming puppets? It starts by embracing something that sounds simple, but isn't: discomfort. The discomfort of not having all the answers. The discomfort of sitting with uncertainty. The discomfort of hearing someone make a strong case against your beliefs and resisting the urge to immediately reject them. We've all heard the phrase, do your own research. But here's the catch. Real research is hard. It's boring. It's messy. It doesn't give you emotional highs. It doesn't give you instant clarity. And it definitely doesn't wrap things up with a neat little bow. But that's also why it's valuable. Because the goal of research, of thinking deeply, isn't to confirm what you already believe. It's to test it. To see if it can hold up under pressure. Bonhoeffer paid the ultimate price for his refusal to surrender his mind. He was hanged just weeks before the end of World War II. But what he left behind wasn't just a political legacy, it was a moral one. A reminder that defending the possibility of human thought, of genuine moral reasoning, is one of the most important things a person can do. And that's still true, maybe more true now than ever. Because, let's be honest, we're not just living in an age of information. We're living in an age of weaponized information, of emotional manipulation, of curated feeds, of AI-generated lies. We're facing systems, not just individuals, that are actively working to undermine our ability to think clearly. So when you choose to stop scrolling and actually read something deeply, when you pause before reposting that emotionally charged headline, when you admit you're unsure instead of pretending to know, you're not just making a smart move. You're resisting. You're defending something that's under attack, your mind. And here's the most uncomfortable truth of all. Stupidity feels good. It feels easy. It gives you a tribe. It offers clear enemies and simple solutions. That's why it's so appealing and so dangerous. But thinking, real thinking, that feels like work. It feels like humility. It feels like getting punched in the ego, and that's why it's so rare. But just like physical exercise, mental discipline grows stronger with practice. If you want to be someone who can stand fast when others fall into groupthink, you have to train that muscle. So here's a small challenge for you this week. Something simple, but powerful. Pick one belief you hold strongly. Something political, social, moral, anything. Now spend 30 minutes digging into the best arguments against it. Not the straw man versions, not the dumb memes, the strongest, most thoughtful critiques. Why? Not to change your mind, but to see if your belief actually deserves the confidence you've given it. If it holds up, awesome, now you've strengthened it. If it wobbles, even better, now you know where to keep growing. This is what Bonhoeffer meant by costly grace. The grace to think clearly, to hold your beliefs responsibly, to stay open even when it hurts, because at the end of the day, this isn't about being right, it's about being human. When you surrender your ability to think critically, to question, to doubt, to explore, you're not just giving up a skill, you're giving up a part of yourself. Bonhoeffer's message wasn't just a warning, it was a call to do the hard thing, to think carefully in a world that rewards carelessness, to slow down in a world that demands speed, to be honest in a world that profits from pretense. So here we are, the final stretch. And if you've made it this far, it means one thing: you're willing to think. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it hurts a little. And that's powerful. Bonhoeffer's warning wasn't meant to scare us into silence. It was meant to wake us up to the fact that our ability to think critically is fragile, and the world we live in is constantly trying to take it from us. Not with violence, not with censorship, but with distraction, with emotional manipulation, with speed. And that brings us to the final and most important idea. In a world that profits from our intellectual surrender, the simple act of thinking carefully is resistance. You don't have to be a genius. You don't need a PhD. You don't need to win every debate. You just need to stay curious, to stay open, to stay committed to thinking, especially when everyone else seems to have stopped. That's what Bonhoeffer meant when he asked, "Who stands fast?" Not who's the smartest, not who's the smartest, not who has the best arguments, but who stays grounded, who keeps questioning, who keeps thinking when thinking gets costly. Because here's the truth, it will get costly. You will lose things. People might roll their eyes when you say, "I'm not sure." You might get pushed to pick a side when you'd rather explore the complexity. You might be called naive or indecisive or even disloyal. But that discomfort, that friction, is the price of staying human in a world that wants you to become a mouthpiece. It's easy to fall into certainty. It feels good. It feels safe. But Bonhoeffer reminds us that certainty isn't always courage. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a confident mask. So let's flip the narrative. Let's stop pretending that doubt is weakness. That changing your mind is failure. That saying, "I don't know," makes you less credible. Because in reality, those are the marks of intellectual maturity. And if you're still wondering what this all means in your day-to-day life, let me leave you with this. Every time you resist the urge to share something outrageous without verifying it, every time you pause before jumping on the bandwagon, every time you ask, "What if I'm wrong?" you're doing something radical. You're breaking the cycle. You're choosing to be more than just a product of your environment. And we need more of that. Because right now, the world doesn't need more noise. It doesn't need more hot takes. It doesn't need more outrage. It needs thinkers, people who are willing to slow down, to ask better questions, to engage with complexity, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. So here's my challenge to you, the final one. This week, pick one belief you've never seriously questioned. It could be political, cultural, religious, personal, anything. Now go and find the most thoughtful, credible people who disagree with you. Listen to them. Read them. Not to argue, not to win, but to understand. If your belief survives, it'll be stronger for it. If it doesn't, you'll be wiser. Either way, you win. Because the goal isn't to be certain. The goal is to be clear-eyed, honest, and alive to the complexity of the world around you. That's what Bonhoeffer died defending. The right to think, the courage to question, the dignity of a mind that refuses to be controlled. So now it's your turn. If this video made you pause, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you rethink even one idea you thought was settled, that's not weakness. That's the beginning of intellectual courage. Share this with someone who doesn't run from complexity, someone who wants to think, even when it's hard. Because in a world built to make you passive, the most radical thing you can do is choose to think. And here's what I want you to carry with you. Every time you choose curiosity over certainty, every time you seek evidence instead of outrage, every time you slow down instead of reacting instantly, you're not just protecting your own mind, you're defending the very possibility of human wisdom in an age of artificial stupidity. So let me ask you one last time, what's one belief you're willing to question this week? Drop it in the comments. Let's start a conversation worth having. And remember, when everyone else is rushing to agree, to conform, to stop thinking, be the one who stands fast. Because in the end, the future of human dignity may depend on that simple daily choice, to think for yourself. Thanks for watching.